It's funny how people can decide who you are before you've even said a word funny, in the same way a knife is funny when it's pressed to your ribs. Tonight, in aisle 7 of an overpriced supermarket, I was already guilty of something I hadn't done. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead sounded louder than usual, blending with the soft roll of a cart somewhere behind me. I had come in for milk and bread. Not a confrontation. Not a public spectacle. Not this. The grip on my arm was too firm. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me," the security guard said, his tone clipped, his jaw tense. He was white, mid-40s, built like he had trained for a career in tackling problems rather than talking them out. The way he looked at me told me exactly what he thought I was. I blinked slowly, controlling my breathing. "And why is that?" His eyes flicked down at my hands, then to my coat pocket. "We had reports. You matched the description." The absurdity of it landed in my chest like a stone. I was wearing a tailored suit, polished leather shoes, and a navy tie my mother had given me for my birthday. My briefcase resting against my leg still smelled faintly of the courtroom I had left only 30 minutes ago. Reports. A description. I didn't need to ask. I knew. The nearest shopper, a young woman with earbuds still in, slowed her cart to watch. Somewhere else, a phone camera had already been lifted. I could have argued. I could have laughed bitterly. But instead, I opened my coat and reached inside. The guard's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening. When my hand emerged, it wasn't holding a weapon. It was holding my ID. The laminated card reflected under the harsh supermarket lighting. Caleb Wright, attorney at law. The guard's eyes flickered, first confusion, then realization, then something that looked a lot like shame. His grip loosened as if my skin had burned him. "Oh, Hooser, I didn't." His voice stumbled over itself like a drunk tripping on a curb. Someone said. I let him talk, each half-formed excuse hanging in the cold air between us. He looked everywhere but my eyes. "You thought what?" I asked quietly. The words weren't loud, but they cut sharper than anything else I could have said. His Adam's apple bobbed. "I made a mistake." Behind us, someone muttered. "Bet you wouldn't have made it if he was white." The guard's shoulders tensed, but he didn't deny it. I could feel every pair of eyes in that aisle burning into me, waiting to see if I would forgive him, yell at him, or let it go. But this wasn't just about me. It never was. I slipped my ID back into my pocket. "The thing about mistakes," I said, keeping my voice even, "is that they don't all cost the same." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." The words came out flat, like he was trying to read them off a script he barely believed in. I stood there for a moment longer, letting the silence stretch, letting him sit in it. Then I stepped past him, toward the checkout line, leaving him with his apology and the stares of everyone around. But as I walked away, I knew this wouldn't end in the cereal aisle. The automatic doors of the supermarket sighed open, letting in a burst of cold night air that clung to my skin. Outside, the city hummed, traffic lights blinking in rhythm, tires swishing on wet asphalt, a siren wailing somewhere far away. I stepped into it like a man crossing an invisible border, from one kind of America into another. But my mind wasn't on the street. It was still back in aisle 7, replaying the guard's grip, the flash of suspicion in his eyes, the quicksand apology. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exposed. That's the thing about moments like these, you don't walk away feeling like you've won something. You walk away carrying the weight of knowing it will happen again. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe next week. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, the screen lighting up with a text from Ava. "Dinner still on? Kids miss you." I stared at it for a second longer than I should have. Ava and I weren't married anymore, but we had found a rhythm: dinners twice a week with the twins, occasional banter about homework or birthdays, and the unspoken understanding that we would keep showing up for each other, even if not as husband and wife. I typed back, "Running late. We'll explain." The subway ride home was crowded, the air thick with the mingling smells of perfume, fried food, and tired bodies. People hunched over phones, scrolling endlessly, their faces glowing blue in the dim light. No one looked at me. No one knew that, 20 minutes ago, I'd been just another headline waiting to happen. At home, the apartment felt both too quiet and too loud: the hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock, my own thoughts clattering around like loose coins. I set my briefcase down, loosened my tie, and sank into the couch. But my mind wouldn't settle. It kept circling back to the guard's face. Not the shame part, that was fleeting. The first look, the one before he knew I was a lawyer. That look was permanent. It lived in people. And I'd seen it before. Too many times. I opened my laptop and began typing, the glow of the screen washing over me in the dim room. It wasn't a court brief or a client memo this time. It was a statement. A personal one. Tonight, I went to buy bread and milk. I left with a reminder that my skin can be a crime scene before I've even opened my mouth. A supermarket guard decided I matched the description. No evidence. No conversation, just a grip on my arm and the assumption that I belonged in trouble. When I showed my ID attorney, 10 years of practice, his face changed. But here's the thing. It shouldn't have taken that card to change it. My worth, my safety, my humanity shouldn't hang on a piece of laminated plastic. I'm not writing this for sympathy. I'm writing this because silence is complicity. And I've been silent too many times. I read it twice, then hit post to my social feed. The cursor blinked for a second before the words went live. I didn't expect much. Maybe a handful of likes, a couple of comments from friends, the digital equivalent of a pat on the back. But within minutes, notifications started stacking. Likes, shares, comments pouring in. Some from old classmates, some from strangers, some from people who'd been through the same thing. Then a private message popped up. From an unfamiliar name. I saw what happened. I was there. I recorded it. My pulse quickened. I typed back instantly. Can you send it? Seconds later, a video loaded on my screen. Shaky, grainy, shot from behind a display of cereal boxes, but clear enough. The guard's hand on my arm. My voice, calm but edged with steel. His stumbling apology. The murmurs of the crowd. It wasn't just an incident anymore. It was evidence. I sat there staring at the paused frame, my own face, still and watchful, the guard's expression caught mid-shift from power to panic. The phone rang. It was Marcus, my best friend since law school. Man, I just saw your post. You okay? I'm fine, I said automatically. Then, after a beat, no, not really. You gonna let it slide? I hesitated. I don't know yet. Marcus snorted. You do know? You've been in enough courtrooms to know exactly what happens if people keep letting it slide. He was right. The law didn't change on its own. It was dragged sometimes into the light. And people like me, with platforms and credentials, didn't get to play the luxury card of staying out of it. By morning, the video had gone viral. News outlets were calling. Local reporters wanted a quote. Talk shows wanted me to come on and share my story. And the supermarket? They issued a bland, copy-paste statement about valuing diversity and looking into the matter. The guard's name was nowhere in it. Neither was mine. That afternoon, I got a call from someone higher up. A corporate lawyer, the kind who spoke in sentences so polished they almost squeaked. Mr. Wright, she began, we'd like to extend our sincere apologies on behalf of the company. The incident was regrettable. Regrettable, I repeated. That's an interesting word for public humiliation and racial profiling. A pause. We take these matters very seriously. Do you? I leaned back in my chair. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you take them just seriously enough to hope they go away quietly. She cleared her throat. We'd like to invite you to meet with our leadership team to discuss. I don't want a meeting, I cut in. I want change. And I want accountability. Mr. Wright, perhaps we can find a mutually beneficial. I hung up. My hand lingered on the phone, adrenaline still humming in my veins. The easy thing would be to take whatever settlement they were about to slide across the table, call it closure, and move on. But easy was how this cycle kept turning. I called Marcus back. You free tonight? For you? Always. Good. We've got work to do. We met in his office, a cramped but warm space lined with bookshelves that bowed under the weight of legal tomes. Marcus was already pacing, coffee in hand. You thinking lawsuit? He asked. I'm thinking bigger. Lawsuit, yes, but also visibility. This isn't just about me. This is about every person who's been grabbed, questioned, or accused for existing in the wrong skin. Marcus grinned. I like it when you get righteous. We spread papers across the desk, precedent cases, civil rights statutes, discrimination laws. The path was messy but clear. File a suit against the supermarket for racial profiling, push for a public acknowledgement, and, if we could, force them to implement training that might actually make a difference. The next days blurred into a whirlwind of drafting, phone calls, and media requests. Every time I saw the video online shared, dissected, Meme feed, I felt a mix of pride and unease. Pride that it was sparking conversations. Unease because, for all the noise, I knew change was slower than outrage. One night, Ava called. "I saw the news," she said. The twins saw it too. They had questions. My stomach tightened. What kind of questions? Why someone would think their dad was dangerous? Why it mattered what you were wearing? Why having a lawyer card changed everything? I closed my eyes. What did you tell them? The truth. That some people see color before they see a person, and that you're trying to change that. Her voice softened. "I'm proud of you, Caleb. Just be careful. This can get ugly." I knew she was right. Public fights over racism always got ugly. But maybe ugly was what it took to peel back the layers and see what was rotting underneath. By the end of the week, the lawsuit was filed. The media frenzy spiked again. Protesters gathered outside the supermarket, holding signs that read, "We see you," and "Profiling is the crime." Customers boycotted. Stock prices dipped. And still, the company tried to settle. Still, they tried to frame it as an isolated incident. But the testimonies started coming in emails from other shoppers, former employees, people who'd been followed, questioned, or ejected from the same store for reasons that boiled down to their skin. This wasn't isolated. This was systemic. And we had the receipts. The courthouse steps felt different when you were walking up as a plaintiff instead of a defense attorney. I'd climbed them countless times before, briefcase in hand, ready to defend clients. But that morning, the air seemed heavier, the stone colder under my shoes. Marcus walked beside me, his dark trench coat flaring slightly in the wind. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, though the truth was complicated. I was ready for the fight, but not for the way it would scrape at old wounds. Not for the way every reporter's camera would frame me as either a hero or an agitator. The press was already swarming. Microphones thrust forward. Questions fired like arrows. "Mr. Wright, are you seeking financial damages or systemic change? Do you think the guard should lose his job? Do you believe this incident is part of a larger pattern of racial profiling?" I didn't break stride. "We're here for justice," I said, the words crisp enough to cut through the noise. Not just for me, but for everyone who's been treated as guilty first and human second. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and old paper. The judge presiding was Eleanor Voss, mid-60s, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for fairness but no tolerance for theatrics. She scanned the room like she was weighing each soul in it. The supermarket's legal team was already seated at the defense table. I recognized their lead counsel, Gregory Hale, a corporate bulldog in a $3,000 suit, known for dismantling cases like mine with a smile that never reached his eyes. The guard, Frank Nolan, sat beside him, shifting uncomfortably. Without his uniform, he looked smaller, less sure. His gaze darted around the room, but never landed on me. The opening arguments were a clash of worlds. Marcus started ours with quiet force. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not about a misunderstanding. It is about a system that told a man like Frank Nolan that my client, Caleb Wright, was a threat before he even knew his name. This system didn't need proof. It didn't need reason. It needed only skin color." Hale countered with practiced calm. "The defense will show that this was a good-faith mistake in a high-pressure situation. There was no malice, no intent to discriminate. Only an honest effort to protect store property." It was the word honest that stuck in my teeth. Honest would have meant asking a question before making an accusation. Honest would have meant treating me like a customer, not a suspect. We began calling witnesses. The young woman who had filmed the incident testified first. Her voice shook at the beginning, but she found her footing as she described what she saw. A man in a suit, holding a briefcase, stopped without cause. She spoke of the guard's tone clipped, demanding, and the way it shifted when my ID appeared. The defense tried to paint her as biased, a social media activist looking for viral content. She met Hale's gaze and said, "If filming injustice is activism, then maybe more of us should be activists." The gallery murmured. Next came two former employees of the supermarket. They told stories of subtle but persistent profiling, being told to keep an eye on black customers, following them through aisles, making notes if they lingered too long. One man described being reprimanded for not doing his job because he didn't stop a black teenager who had done nothing but shop quietly. By the time they stepped down, the pattern was undeniable. This wasn't one guard making one mistake. This was a culture that encouraged suspicion of certain people before they even picked something off a shelf. Hale fought back with his own witnesses, other guards who swore they treated everyone equally, managers who insisted there was no official policy encouraging profiling. He brought in a security consultant who spoke in vague terms about best practices and split-second decisions. Then it was Frank Nolan's turn. He shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, and began, "I didn't mean no harm. I just got a report from a cashier that a man was acting suspicious. They said he matched the description of someone who'd been shoplifting earlier that week." Marcus leaned forward. "And what was that description?" Frank hesitated. "Tall, black, male." Marcus's pause was deliberate. "Anything else?" Frank's eyes flicked toward Hale. "No." "So," Marcus said evenly, "you stopped my client for buying groceries because he was tall, black, and male." Frank's face reddened. "I didn't know he was a lawyer." Marcus didn't miss a beat. Would it have mattered if he wasn't? The silence in the room was heavy. Frank opened his mouth, then closed it. "During a recess, I stood by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. Reporters gathered outside, their umbrellas bobbing like black flowers. Ava texted me, 'Kids are watching the news. They're rooting for you.' I swallowed the knot in my throat. Tell them I'm rooting for them too." When we reconvened, the judge allowed the video to be played for the jury. It filled the room with the harsh fluorescent lighting of aisle 7, the sound of my voice, the guard's apology, the murmurs of witnesses. I didn't watch the screen. I watched the jurors. Watched their faces shift, some tightening with discomfort, some softening with sympathy. The defense tried one last angle, to argue that my decision to publicize the video had caused undue harm to Frank Nolan, making him the victim of online harassment. Marcus was ready. Mr. Nolan's embarrassment is not the same as Mr. Wright's humiliation. One fades with time. The other can be reignited by a single glance in a grocery store. When it was my turn to testify, I told them the truth. I told them about the grip on my arm, the flash of judgment in the guard's eyes, the way the apology felt like it belonged to my ID card instead of to me. And then I told them something else about the first time I'd been stopped like that, at 16, on my way home from basketball practice. About the way the officer had patted down my gym bag like it was a drug stash, then let me go without a word. About how that moment had settled in my bones, waiting for nights like this one to wake it up again. "This case," I said, "isn't just about one night in one store. It's about a truth a lot of us live with, that we can be the wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time just by existing. And if we don't call it out, it doesn't stop. It gets comfortable, and it stays." Closing arguments came fast. Marcus's voice carried a quiet fire. "You can't legislate people's hearts, but you can hold them accountable for their actions. Today, you have that chance." Hale's final plea was predictably polished. Don't punish an honest mistake as if it were malicious intent. Then it was in the jury's hands. We waited. The minutes crawled. I could hear the faint tap-tap of someone's pen, the rustle of legal pads, the low hum of the ventilation system. When the jury finally returned, I searched their faces, but they were unreadable. The foreperson stood. "We find in favor of the plaintiff, Caleb Wright." A rush of air left my lungs. They continued, "We award damages in the amount of $250,000 and require the defendant, under court order, to implement mandatory anti-bias training for all staff and security personnel." The gallery erupted, some cheers, some gasps. I didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't joy. It was relief. And it was only the beginning. Outside the courthouse, microphones found me again. This time, I spoke directly into them. "This verdict is not just for me. It's for the teenager stopped on his way home. For the mother followed through every aisle. For the man questioned in front of his children. It's a reminder that accountability isn't optional. And that dignity is not something you have to earn, it's something you deserve." Marcus clapped me on the shoulder as we descended the steps. "Hell of a fight, brother." I glanced back at the courthouse, at the cameras, at the people who had shown up just to be present. "It's not over," I said. "But maybe tonight, we moved the needle." The days after the verdict felt strange. Not quite the opposite, actually. My phone rang constantly. Emails flooded in. Messages from people I'd never met, but who spoke as if we'd known each other forever. "I went through the same thing last year. Thank you for fighting. I work at a store where this happens all the time. Maybe your case will finally make them listen. My son is 14. I pray he grows up in a world where this doesn't happen to him. Some messages were uglier. Anonymous accounts calling me race baiter, troublemaker, attention seeker. I didn't bother responding. The verdict had been handed down, but in their minds, the trial was still ongoing. The supermarket chain released a new statement, this time naming me directly, promising a renewed commitment to fairness and inclusion. It was corporate PR wrapped in legal caution, but it was more than the nothing they'd offered before. And yet I knew words were the easy part. Change was the grind. Marcus and I met with a group of local activists who'd been organizing around racial profiling in retail spaces for years. We sat in a circle in a small community center, the smell of fresh coffee in the air. "This case of yours," said Lillian, a woman in her 60s with a voice like gravel and a smile like sunrise, "gave us leverage we didn't have before. Now when we go to these chains, we're not just asking. We're saying, here's proof, here's precedent." I leaned forward. Then let's not waste it. Let's make it harder for them to treat bias as a one-off incident. Let's make it policy that bias gets consequences. By the time we left that meeting, there were plans for a coalition: lawyers, activists, store employees willing to speak up. A structure to catch stories like mine before they got buried under the next news cycle. One evening, about 2 weeks later, Ava invited me over for dinner with the twins. She said they had something they wanted to show me. When I walked in, the smell of baked chicken and rosemary hit me, warm and grounding. The kids were at the dining table, crayons scattered in front of them. "Daddy," my daughter, Elise, jumped up and hugged me. My son, Tyler, followed with his usual shy grin. "We made something," Elise announced, dragging me toward the table. It was a poster. Big block letters in rainbow colors. "Be fair." Underneath, they'd drawn people of all different shades holding hands in front of a store. I crouched down beside them. "This is amazing." Tyler looked serious. "Mom said some people don't get treated fair because of how they look. We thought maybe if we put up signs, people would remember." Ava, leaning in the doorway, met my eyes. She didn't have to say anything. I saw it, their pride, and something softer. I pulled both kids into my arms. "You know," I said, "that's exactly the kind of change we need. Not just rules. Reminders." Later that night, after the kids were in bed, Ava and I stood in the kitchen. "You did good, Caleb," she said quietly. "It's not enough yet," I replied. "There's still so much." "I know," she cut in gently. "But you didn't let it slide. You showed them it matters. That matters." I looked at her, at the home we used to share, at the lives we still shared in pieces. "You ever think about how many of these moments we've just swallowed? All the times we didn't say anything?" Her gaze was steady. "Yeah, but you said something this time." And it echoed. The echo kept traveling. Months later, I stood at the podium in a university lecture hall, speaking to a room full of law students about the case. Behind me, on the projector, was the first still frame from the video, the guard's hand on my arm, my ID visible. "This," I told them, "is what racial profiling looks like when it's caught on camera. But most of the time, there is no camera. That's why the law matters. Because it's the tool we have when no one is watching." A student in the back raised his hand. "Do you think the verdict changed the supermarket chain?" I paused. "I think it made them uncomfortable. And sometimes, discomfort is the first step toward change. But real change? That's on all of us to keep showing up, to keep making it impossible to ignore." When the lecture ended, a young black woman came up to me. "My dad went through something like this," she said. "He never talked about it. I think maybe now I'll ask him." Her voice trembled, and I realized that conversations like that were another kind of victory, one you couldn't measure in damages or court orders. The last time I saw Frank Nolan was by accident. I was in line at a coffee shop near the courthouse, and he walked in. He froze when he saw me, coffee cup halfway to the counter. For a moment, we just looked at each other. He finally said, "I lost my job." I nodded slowly. I heard, "I'm taking some courses now, trying to see things different." Something in his tone told me he meant it. Maybe losing that job had stripped away the armor enough for him to actually look inward. I didn't offer forgiveness. That wasn't the point. But I said, "Then make it mean something." He gave a small nod, then left with his coffee. Spring came, and with it, the first visible signs that something had shifted. The supermarket chain rolled out its anti-bias training. Signs appeared in their stores. "We are committed to treating every customer with dignity and respect. Were they perfect? No. Would mistakes still happen? Probably. But now, there was a precedent. A paper trail. A warning that accountability was possible. One Saturday, I took Elise and Tyler grocery shopping. Not at that supermarket, I wasn't ready for that, but at a small, family-owned place in our neighborhood. As we walked the aisles, I noticed something. No one was following us. No one was eyeing my hands or my pockets. We were just shopping, laughing over which cereal to get, arguing about ice cream flavors. At the checkout, the cashier, a young man with a friendly smile, complimented Elise's drawing on her t-shirt. She lit up, showing him the rainbow "Be Fair" letters. "That's a good message," he said. She nodded solemnly. "My dad says fairness is for everybody." I looked at her, at Tyler, at the groceries sliding down the belt. And for a brief moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, the needle had moved a little further than I'd dared to hope. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank page. I began to type. Justice isn't a finish line. It's a road we walk, often uphill, often in the rain. But every step matters, not just the steps we take for ourselves, but the ones we take for the people behind us, so they have a clearer path than we did. I paused, hands hovering over the keys. Outside, the city moved, horns, footsteps, the low thrum of life continuing. I thought of aisle 7, of the grip on my arm, of the look in Frank Nolan's eyes when the card changed everything. And I thought of my kids, their crayons, their big rainbow letters spelling out the simplest truth I knew. Be fair. Sometimes, change began with nothing more than that. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.